Welcome, everyone. My name is Elian Ramos. I'll be your host tonight. 5 years ago, on July 24th, 2009, the minimum wage was raised to what it is now, $7.25, and it still hasn't changed from that date. In the meantime, the cost of living has been rising nonstop. And that, of course, is being a problem for a lot of low-income families in this country. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if the minimum wage had kept up with inflation, it would be $10.86 today. Obviously, the families of America, you can only imagine how much better people will be doing if the minimum wage would be $10.86 today. So tonight we're going to be talking about this issue that affects so many families in this country. And I have a group of experts here who are going to be talking about the impact of the minimum wage being raised or not raised for the millions of families, low-income families in America, the impact to women, the impact to businesses, and also the impact to the economy at large. We're also going to be talking about the Live the Wage Challenge, which started last week, on the anniversary of the last raise to the minimum wage. And so I'm going to be introducing my guests tonight. The first one is Alicia Criado, who is the field coordinator of the Economic Policy Project at NCLR. How are you, Alicia?
Hi, doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah.
Next up is Carmen Ortiz Larsen, and
Hi.
She has so many titles, so I'm going to be reading her titles. She is the owner of Aquas Inc., which is a privately owned company here in Maryland. She's also the vice president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce at Montgomery County, and she's also a member of the Business for a Fair Minimum Wage. How are you, Carmen?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here tonight. Next up, we have Katie Hamm, who is the Director of Early Childhood Policy at the Center for American Progress. How are you, Katie?
I'm good, thank you.
And later on, we're going to be joined by Raquel Roybal, who is the Care Coordinator, a member of OLE, which is a part of the National Domestic Policy Domestic Worker Alliance. I'm so sorry. So how are you guys? Thank you so much for taking the time to be here tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And so let's start with the questions right away. We have a lot of talking points to talk about tonight. The first question I want to direct to Alicia. Alicia, could you please give us a kind of a background explanation of the minimum wage? What is it? How does it impact low-income families? Why is this a Latino issue to begin with?
Sure. Yeah. So, Eliana, as you mentioned at the beginning in the intro, currently the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. And, throughout the country, I think it's clear that we've been seeing a lot of momentum around this issue. And, the truth is that at $7.25 an hour, that means, that someone earning that annually earns just a little bit above $15,000 a year, which really is not enough to support a family. And, that's really only, it's poverty wages. And so these level of wages mean that a lot of families aren't able to make ends meet. And, the other point I'll make around the minimum wage is, it's been, Congress is really the one that acts to raise the minimum wage, and they've done it 3 times in the past 30 years. So the most recent raise was in 2007, and so last week marked 5 years since we last had a boost in the minimum wage. The other piece just to note is that there's also something called the tip minimum wage, which, some people hear tips and they think, oh, that's the money I leave after, I eat a meal in a restaurant, or, but the truth is that, if a worker receives at least $30 a month in tips, then their employer is required to pay them what we call a tip minimum wage, which at the federal level is $2.13 an hour. I'll repeat that, $2.13 an hour. And it's been frozen at that rate since 1991. So, you know, and again, there's a lot of complexities with our tip minimum wage, but the idea is that, you know, we want to make sure that workers are able to, you know, earn wages that make them sustainable or able to feed their families. So right now, there's, again, an ongoing debate of, you know, should we raise the minimum wage, and if so, to what level? And there's legislation in Congress now that would raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 over the next 3 years, and then also boost the tip minimum wage to 70% of the minimum wage.
And I'm gonna be showing. I was showing the charts earlier, but I want to say that for when you're talking about the whole study that NCLR recently did about the minimum wage. So I'll show that with more detail later, and I want you to really explain what those numbers look like for the different nationalities and the different ethnicities.
Sure.
So now I have a question for Carmen. Carmen, depending on who you ask and who you want to believe, right, you can come away with a very different perspective in terms of how the minimum wage would affect small businesses. Now, you're a small business owner. You are somebody who is very involved in the Chamber of Commerce here in Montgomery County. How do you feel about the minimum wage rising, and what impact does raising it have on small businesses in your experience?
Personal experience in my business, I've been a business owner for over 25 years. And what we found is that when people are earning the minimum wage, they can't make ends meet. So when we did have people coming in at minimum wage, we had people who came in tired. They were stressed. They tried to do a good job, but oftentimes they were doing 2 jobs because they had to make ends meet. Or if they had families, a lot of times they had problems at home that were more serious than people who were making more money, just because the financial strain on a family can take its toll, especially if you have children and so forth. So what we found is that we had a higher incidence of people not coming to work or coming to work late. So when we realized that it was related to the income, we did raise the rates, and nobody here makes any than $10 an hour. Most people make more. And people who are even interns and entry-level people who make around $10 or $12 or even $15, depending on what they're doing. And we find that then we spend less money trying to replace these people. We have people who stay longer, who stay for a longer period of time. They don't quit. They're here more on time and ready to work. How does it impact our business? Well, it makes us better in serving our customer base. People are happier, and I think that we have a responsibility to pay attention to that. Not only is it good for business, we become a better quality business, but also it makes sense. It's more humane. If you think about $15,000, even if just plus the minimum wage, it's the same across the country. So even in areas where it's more expensive to live, in DC area, for example, if you wanted to have housing, you couldn't get too much less than $1,000 a month, just $12,000 a year. So I'm wondering how you would accept. And good thing, the businesses that we have worked with through the chamber are all kinds of different businesses. They're landscaping companies, construction companies, food providers, caterers, sandwich shop owners, as well as the office services people. And I think in general, most companies that are resisting changes in the minimum wage haven't tried it out and are struggling with employees who are not not very reliable, are stressed. Most people are paying above the minimum wage and find this that they can be a better quality organization and still make money. And so, in fact, in some instances, it has pushed them to be more creative about what their offerings are and focus more on the quality of the product rather than keeping a lower cost. People a lot of go for something that's a higher quality rather than just the bottom line cost where the employees are stressed or they're not being served in a good way because you don't have a good workforce. So I think overall small companies do better when they pay a better wage, a living wage, I would say, than those who don't. And they can focus on the quality and uniqueness of the service that they provide. So
And
I
at
think
the same time,
yeah.
yeah, and at the same time, I guess it serves you to get more loyalty also from your workers, right? Because if I have a job that treats me in a human way, then I'm more likely to stick with it, right?
Right, and small businesses typically are very family-oriented. We find that people always they always have something happening in their lives, and occasionally they'll have a challenge. And if you are in a small business where employees feel that you care about them, generally they'll come out and people will come over and help them out. It's not just that the employer steps in, but other co-workers as well. And if you have an environment where people are working hard and able to meet their obligations a lot of times, so they'll come over and help out. And we've seen that where people have had family members who've been sick and other co-workers come in and help out. And we as a company provide also some emergency support in the eventuality that somebody gets into a crisis. But like I said, I think that as far as the minimum earned, it's pretty ridiculous where it is right now. It's pretty silly, and the objections that I've heard from the people who object are people who just are giving a pat answer and haven't thought it through very well. They're thinking, well, it's my costs are going to go up, and guess what? Your lease is going up, and your office supplies are going up, but we don't have office supply control payments and lease control payments. And people are your major investment in your company. So I think it's important to treat them well and expect a good service. And it's a relationship. It's a two-way street relationship between the employer and the employee. And as it should be, it's a partnership.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And I want to ask Katie too, because Katie, I've seen a lot of movement online, and I've seen a lot of activism around the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, and all of this. To what do you attribute this? Do you think that people are more aware of the issue, or what is going on? And what is your experience based on the kind of work that you do at the Center for American Progress?
Well, I think we're really seeing a lot of momentum around this issue because Americans are increasingly aware of the fact that the economy is not working for everyone. People at the top of the income spectrum are making more, and we really haven't seen the growth for our lowest wage workers. And I think that notion really flies in the face of our collective vision of the American dream, which is if you work hard, if you get up and you go to work every day, you shouldn't live in poverty. You should be able to get ahead, and that's just not the reality with the current minimum wage. We're also talking about 28 million workers. That's a huge segment of our population that's impacted by this issue. And it's a lot of women, and it's a lot of women raising children. And I think because of all these reasons, we see that 70% of Americans support an increase in the minimum wage, and that includes 50% of Republicans. It's really an issue that a lot of people can get on board with. And I think we're seeing the impacts of not raising the minimum wage. So the child poverty rate, 1 in 5 children live in poverty now. And it's not because their parents aren't working. It's because their parents are working and they're not making wages that allow them to live above the poverty line. And so, children experience that. They experience the stress of parents, malnutrition, living in neighborhoods that are where a lot of people are living in poverty. So it's, it's something that's impacting our families. It's something that really impacts childcare providers. 75% of childcare workers are living below the poverty level. So that means not only are children in poverty experiencing this in their families, but most of our children who go to childcare or an early education program are experiencing that their providers are stressed out by the effects of poverty. So I think it's really an issue that resonates with a lot of Americans, and a lot of people are experiencing it firsthand.
It's a very human issue, it's something that affects so many families in this country, and yet we see that it continues to be politicized. We talked about before how it hasn't been changed since 2009, and in the meantime, people are the cost of living for a lot of families has been raising and raising. So what are the chances, you think, for it to be increased anytime soon? Can it be, can the proposals for the Minimum Wage Fairness Act pass anytime soon, you think?
Well, I think I certainly can't predict what Congress is going to do. But, to the extent that Congress is listening to their constituents who are experiencing this firsthand, and to the extent that they're looking at these polling numbers that show an overwhelming number of Americans, 70%, are supporting this, I think that speaks to the need for Congress to act.
So I'd like to chime in a little bit on this.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of businesses say that it's going to have a really rough impact on them. That's what on the people who don't favor the minimum wage increase in Congress. They're listening to a lot of large businesses that are saying, especially large businesses, but of course there's a lot of small businesses as well that say this is a terrible thing for us. It's going to have a terrible impact and that sort of thing. I think that any business that is business people are very creative and very innovative, and they really do adapt when things happen. They adapt, and we've seen this over and over again with different kinds of situations. The economy takes a bad turn all of a sudden. The Twin Towers and the disaster that we had following that, some of the very, very terrible things that happened in Wall Street, and companies have survived and adapted. And how much more important is it to adapt to something that is going to have such a tremendous impact on our population from an economic standpoint? And when people make more money, they're going to spend more money. But I think one of the things that I'd like Congress to remember is that many business people support the minimum wage, and they don't want to have it happen from one day to the next. They want to have some time to plan for it, and I think that we are proposing to have some time to plan for it. But given a little time to prepare for it, I think businesses are not only going to be able to handle it, but they're going to benefit from that in the long run. So I just wanted to make that very clear, because I also people say, well, we won't be able to hire as many people. I don't know. I think that you hire the people that you need to hire, and that you're going to create the product of the quality you're going to create the product you're going to create. So if you don't hire as many people at first, somebody shouldn't be working at minimum wage and have to collect food stamps. Maybe they just need to find other kinds of things to do. I don't know. It's just, to me, it seems to me that sometimes you're hiring people that are spending half their time trying to figure out how to collect food stamps, how to get other kinds of things, and they don't even have the benefit of saying, I can stay home with my kids some of this time. I don't know. I think that they should be able to pay them enough to have quality time doing a good day's work and be able to pump some of that money back into the economy.
We've seen actually in a lot of the places where the minimum wage has been raised, the companies are actually thriving, and the economy in those places has actually better for it.
Right.
So let's talk about the economy for a second. And Alicia, I want to talk to you about that because I know that NCLR recently did a study between NCLR and Latino decisions about this very topic. And so I want you to tell me a little bit that whole economic rebound that we've been talking about and that we've seen in the places where the minimum wage has been raised. Has that started to show up for Latinos already? Is the situation improving for our community? What are the numbers that you have found? What are some of the figures?
Yeah, well, just to put a little bit of context also in the situation. So as Katie was mentioning, it's about 28 million workers in the United States that would benefit from a boost in the minimum wage to $10.10. And approximately 24% of those, or about 6.8 million, are Latino workers. And so, and as the chart shows, it's a great graphic.
Can you see the chart actually?
Yeah. So that's a great graphic that actually CAP has put together. So just showing that it's about $16.1 billion that would go towards boosting wages for people of color, and as you can see, 8.5 billion would go towards Latinos. So minimum wage is definitely a Latino issue. And, in terms of where the economy is, we know that a majority of the jobs since the recession ended and our recovery have been low-wage jobs. So oftentimes now people are looking for employment, and this is definitely the case among Latino workers. And then, they are finding low-paying jobs, part-time jobs that just don't offer a lot of stability. So, in terms of kind of some of the polling numbers and some of the data that we found recently, we polled 500 Latino registered voters and found that, a majority of those households are worried about things like unemployment and definitely are facing significant economic challenges. And so while, many voters think that the economy is improving, they definitely feel, what we found in the poll is that, their financial outlook is still suffering. And so, for example, about 70% of voters said that they're not earning enough to cover their basics month to month. And more importantly, when asked about the minimum wage, 55% of Latino voters said that they'd be more likely to vote for and support a candidate that supports raising the minimum wage. So we know that, our community is aware of the impact, knows that this is an issue that can't stand on the sidelines, and that it is important for elected officials to take a position and, in this case, boost the minimum wage.
It's so important for the whole country. I mean, when you have this many people who are actually in favor of this passing, you know that the issue is going to be important come November. And,
right.
and in every election, I hope that people don't start talking about it.
Right.
So now let me go back to Carmen, because one of the biggest objections that we hear when we talk about the minimum wage is that, it's going to be detrimental to businesses, but also that it's going to show up, it's going to affect the consumers at the end. So how has paying your employees above the minimum wage affected your businesses, and how do you see it affecting consumers? Is this going to show up in the the prices, or how do you see this working out?
Because I think that the way we bill for our services is a careful balance on what the market will bear, how we can do the production, how we can accomplish our production with the costs that are input. And so, of course, when you raise the minimum wage, if that's a key function in your production, you have to readjust certain other factors, whether you increase the cost, and then if you increase the cost, and then you're not going to be able to be as competitive. But if everybody has to raise the minimum wage, then everybody has the same challenge. What you do in terms of not being as competitive is you have to adjust what your product is, how you present it, how you sell it. So you adjust things. You adjust how you do advertising. I mean, we've realized tremendous savings in advertisement just in using the internet as we're doing right now, for example, well, you know, we've been able to save that money and increase our profits. Why not pass some of that profit down to the worker? I see that in our work, we have been constantly finding ways to improve our production and reduce our cost of production, but that profitability has not, some of that profitability should be passed down to improving the conditions of the worker. So, and you can still be profitable, and you can still have your shareholders be happy. It doesn't take very much to increase somebody who's at minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. It doesn't. It isn't. That's not going to make or break your organization. So I think that's, people are concerned about their impact, but that's not the only thing that impacts your bottom line. A lot of other things impact your bottom line.
Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, you're going to be making a lot of people's lives a lot better, right?
That's right.
I want to talk about a little bit because we're running a little bit out of time, but I don't want to leave the Hangout without talking about something that started happening last week, and that's been happening for a couple of years now. And I'm talking about the Leave the Wage campaign. I want you guys to talk a little bit about this, and in particular, Katie, because I know, Katie, that you participated in the Leave the Wage campaign. So tell me a little bit, in general, Alicia and Carmen and Katie, tell me a little bit about what the campaign is about. And then, Katie, I want you to talk about your experience in doing the challenge. Who wants to go first?
Well, I think maybe, Katie, you can just give an overview, since CAP has been one of the ones organizing the...
Go ahead, Katie.
Sure, I'm happy to. So the Live the Wage Challenge invited people to try to live on $77 for 1 week. And that number is what you would make as a minimum wage worker after you account for what is paid for housing and taxes. So you can't, it's designed to kind of give some insight into what a minimum wage worker might have to do in terms of trade-offs. So $77 is the amount that has to include all of your food, your transportation, and your entertainment. So a number of high-profile people took the Live the Wage challenge. Here at CAP, our leadership, Neera Tanden and Ted Strickland, both took the Live the Wage challenge. Congressman Tim Ryan took the Live the Wage challenge. And, you know, I read actually today that the thing that put him over the edge was his baby needed some prescription medications, and they were $24, and so that put him over the 77. My experience, I started out doing okay. You know, I went to the grocery store, purchased the cheapest items I could find, and was making it. But then my husband and I moved, and when we moved, we didn't have our kitchen supplies, so we weren't able to prepare food at home, and that just kind of made it impossible. So I've definitely learned a lot through this process. One of the things I've learned is you have to spend money to save money. So things like having a fully stocked kitchen can help you prepare food more cheaply at home. Buying in bulk, which I couldn't afford to do on the minimum wage, was you know, one of the big factors for me. It's really hard, and there's no room for anything to happen, like a car that needs a new part or a sink that needs to be replaced. As far as entertainment went, I didn't have any. There was nothing left over, and I don't have children, but I can't imagine what that would be like when you have children in your household. I was very grateful for DC having public pools and public libraries and some of those commodities that all families can access. So it was definitely a challenge, and I think it's been getting a lot of attention, which is really helpful for a lot of people to understand what the trade-offs are when you're trying to make it on that type of wage.
Yeah, I think it's very hard unless you are in that situation for you to kind of wrap your mind around, especially like you said, when you have children, because
Mhm.
it's so unpredictable when you have a kid. You never know, a kid
Yeah.
could be fine and 5 minutes later you need to go to the hospital,
Mhm.
and God forbid. But so I want to, like with all of this said and the whole situation explained, we know of all of these different things that are going on all over the country in terms of campaigns, but also in terms of opposition to the minimum wage being raised. So, what would be your call to action for people who are watching this show right now and who don't know, what can I do? I just go to work and I make, $7 an hour, $7.25 an hour every day, and I need to survive. But what can we do to help push for the raising the minimum wage? What would you say to people?
I
One
can
of you first.
start. Yeah, I think first and foremost, people need to make sure if they're able to register to vote. We have an upcoming election in November that will decide, the fate of a lot of members of Congress. And like I said, that's really where a lot of the decision making is stuck, right? And there hasn't been movement. So if people aren't aware now, I encourage everyone to make sure that they know where their member of Congress stands on this issue and share their stories. I think there's one thing to be said about living the wage for a week. There's millions of people who are living this day in, day out and can really speak to the struggles that they face. So, here at NCLR, we've been, and as many other organizations in the National Coalition have been collecting stories, amplifying those. It's too bad that Raquel wasn't able to join, but just her story alone, she's a single mother, 4 kids, works 2 jobs, earning the minimum wage, and then even with that is not able to make ends meet. I would encourage people to register, hold your elected officials accountable, not only this November, but moving forward.
Thank you. Carmen?
Well, I think that if they are working in a small business and they find that their boss is accessible, I think being able to engage in a conversation about that is important. Keeping in mind that nobody likes to be attacked, so employers, I think they just, if it's a conversation that says, how do you feel about the minimum wage, and how there might, it's kind of difficult for them. Sometimes people who are minimum wage don't ask because they're afraid to maybe hurt their job possibilities. But sometimes I think if they approach it in a way saying, what are the possibilities? Have you heard about this minimum wage? How do you feel about it? Instead of making it personal, just engage in that policy question. I think you can get people to think about it and be aware of the hardships that you wouldn't otherwise have thought about. So I think that's one way, at least getting out the vote. But sometimes people, as writing a letter to your representative. Even if you can't vote, write a letter to to the person who represents that area. Write to the legislators and say, these are my difficulties. I think that that's important. Just talking about it, like exchanging ideas and talking about how that this is really important and how much it costs. We had some people coming in. I had no idea how expensive public transportation was until somebody actually came over and told me. I said, why is it so hard for you to get to work? Well, look, I take this bus and then I change to that other bus and that other bus, and then by the time I'm done coming and going from work, I've spent $8 in transportation in the day, and that's that happens, and so I think just talking about it and making people aware of it is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very true. Very true. And Katie, your call to action?
I would just echo what's already been said, and I also think that a lot of people depend on minimum wage workers for childcare or for food service or for other caregiving work, and I think it's really important that you ask, how much does your child care provider make? And if you go to look at a child care center, ask how much the staff make, because when employers hear that consumers and clients are interested in that and want to know and change their behavior on that, I think it helps highlight that that issue. And I encourage people to go to the Live the Wage website and learn more about it and how they can, there's information on how you can highlight it in your community.
What is the URL? Is livethewage.org?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you heard it here. I know there's a lot of online tools to find out your representative's phone number and their email address is public information. So do a quick Google search and you'll be able to find that. Visit the livethewage.org website, and don't let up the fight, because this is something that affects so many families. And you may think that it doesn't affect you if you don't make minimum wage, but like Katie was saying, it may affect the people that take care of your children, or it may affect the people that work in other positions in your same company. So I urge you all to find out more about this issue and to get involved. And I want to thank my guests tonight for taking the time to be here and to explain this issue to us. This is something that, sometimes we don't think about on an everyday basis, unless you're living through it. Like Raquel, I am very sorry that Raquel couldn't make it tonight because, like Alicia was saying, her story is very powerful. But we'll make sure that we have another conversation of this on this topic. And I want to thank Alicia Criado from NCLR for being here. Carmen Larson, thank you so much for being here, Carmen. And Katie Hamm from Center for American Progress, thank you for taking the time for being here. And to all of you who are watching here, thank you for also for watching every week. And you're going to be able to watch this broadcast again on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/user/Elian Ramos. And I see you again next week. I also have another Hangout tomorrow, but on this Tuesday night Hangout, I see you next Tuesday. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanna. Thanks. Good night.
Bye.